As you can see, my name is Teddy Carroll, and I'm an ORF-trained certified enterprise coach. And here are some other credentials that I'll let you read for yourself, because I don't like to read things about me. And I'm also eager to get started. So to get started, I'd love for you to please add your location to your name in your little Zoom window box there. All you have to do is click on the ellipsis that's in your window. When you mouse over it, click on the ellipsis in the upper right corner, select rename, and then add your location so that we can all know a little bit more about each other. All right, let's see. I see a few things popping up. Berlin, Netherlands, South Dakota, Denver. I'm in Boulder myself, so I guess I should follow along with my request, and I'll do the same. There we go. Teddy Carroll, Boulder, Colorado. All right, thank you for everybody who, Nashville, I see that one pop up. Thank you for everybody who shared your location with us. Really appreciate it. It's nice to know a little bit more about our fellow attendees. All right, now that we've done that, let's learn even more about each other. I'm very curious about your experience with this conference so far. And the question is, what's one thing that you've learned from the other sessions that you've attended today? And once I count to 3, I would love for you all to put some of that in the chat box. All right. So I'm going to count to 3, and then you can drop it in the chat and hit submit whenever you're, or hit the send button whenever you're ready. So 1, 2, 3, go ahead. What's one thing that you've learned from the other sessions? More breaks in virtual workshops. Yeah, learned that the hard way at the beginning of this. Saw people wilting at like 90 minutes into, I mean, normally, even in person, people would start to wilt after 90 minutes, but online, it's actually quite torturous. The 4-player model, that sounds cool. Action modes from structural dynamics, groups of 3 are better for sharing ideas in smaller groups when brainstorming. Yeah. Move, follow, oppose, bystand. Ooh, that's nice. All right, write down what's in your head. All right, so everybody take the opportunity just to scroll through that chat and see, because you probably all weren't in the exact same sessions together. So just take a look and see what's been going on in this conference today. Now we can get started with the full presentation. I'm sorry, I'm pausing because Google is giving me trouble. Excuse me. Before we talk about how to have better workshop openings, we're going to need to settle on some common definitions before we go any farther. So I asked Google the other day to define facilitation, and it gave me this very helpful response. The act of facilitating. Okay, great. I probably could have figured that out by myself without all of that wonderful technology. So I thought that I would be, yes, William, Google giving trouble. It does happen. So I thought that I would try to be smarter than the machine and ask it to define the root of the word. So I said, Google, define facilitate. And it told me facilitate means to make things easier or to help bring about some change or anything. And I felt, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So when we're talking about facilitation in the previous sessions, in this session here, whenever outside of this session, we're going to use both of these definitions, bringing something about, and particularly making it easier to do something, or easier to bring something about, which usually means decision making, but that's not always the case. And now, for the purposes of this session, when we talk about workshop, we're going to be talking about any meeting at which a group of people engage in intensive discussion and activity on a particular subject or project. So that means when I say workshop, I mean any structured facilitated doesn't confuse anybody who's in this room, but a facilitator is a person or thing that makes an action or process easy or easier. Again, matches up with our definition for facilitate. So that's the job then. When you are facilitating, you are making the task at hand easier for the participants of the workshop. And hopefully what you can learn in this workshop today can be something that you can take out and make your next facilitation a little bit easier. Now, the title of this presentation says that we will start from the beginning. But if you don't mind, I'd like to change that and ask us to begin before we start. So let's begin with a quote. You can see we have a quote from President Abraham Lincoln: "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." I just realized there's a typo in that. I put "and I will spend" twice there. I'm very sorry about that. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. So what do you think President Lincoln is talking about here? Go ahead and drop any thoughts that you might have in the chat box. All right, I see a theme developing here, and one word that keeps popping up in particular. And yes, that's right, old Abe was talking about preparation. I can see some of the responses here. Understanding a problem or opportunity that lies ahead. Better prepared you are, the stronger your facilitation is going to be. Spend more time on preparation than the actual activity. That's a good one, and there's a whole bunch of literature out there that could tell you, their recommendations on how much time you should spend on preparation. I'm not going to get into that. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about preparation, but it's worth it to talk about a few things before we jump into the rest. Now, as far as preparation goes, just like any good meal, well-facilitated workshop requires preparation, like editing and making sure that you don't have spelling errors or typos like I did on the previous screen. And when we're talking about a good meal, we're talking about a well-planned mise en place for the chefs. And from the French, that means to put in place. So let's prepare by putting some of the things in place to help us succeed when your workshop begins. So when preparing for a workshop, it's always helpful to do your research, especially if you're an outside facilitator. You don't need to be an expert on the company's business, but it could definitely be helpful if you know some of the jargon and some of the things that they will be talking about when they start talking about their business. And it's even helpful to know what words, phrases, or parts of the business that should not be mentioned during a facilitation. You're also going to want to ask yourself questions like, who will be participating? What is the subject matter? And what are the goals? Now you're going to ask yourself, and you're going to ask your partner, the person who's hiring you, the client, if you will. And in some cases, if you're an internal coach or a facilitator, whoever is sponsoring the activity that you're going to be facilitating. These are questions that you're going to ask of them so that you know what you're preparing for. And it's also time to start thinking about what tools or exercises you might use to facilitate the conversations that will make the workshop successful. And you definitely need to prepare the space, online or in person, doesn't matter. The space needs to be ready beforehand, before you start, because the start of your workshop is not the time to be fiddling with room setup or Zoom links, or even making sure that you can share your screen with participants. If I would have arrived in the room 2 minutes sooner, we all wouldn't have seen that stumbling, and the beginning of our time together would have been a little bit smoother. So those are some of the things that you have to consider when preparing space. And you also need to provide the tools and supplies that people will be using. Paper, pens, stickies, links, if in person. Just like tables and chairs, you need to be sure that participants have the necessary tools ready as soon as they arrive for the workshop. You'll lose valuable time if you're still hunting for those supplies or tools after the beginning of your workshop. And online, that includes making sure that you have your breakout room set up as they were set up very well for this conference, and being able to move in and out of those as best as possible. And again, the earlier you can do that, the better. And then one of the last things that you will start doing in your preparation for your workshop, in addition to creating the plan, you're actually going to be creating the agenda for the workshop. And every good workshop should be accompanied by a good agenda. And again, sooner is better. The invitation itself should include the agenda. In fact, you should never send an invitation to a workshop without providing an agenda. Now, I know that there will be always extenuating circumstances where you have to grab time on somebody's calendar before you've had any of this planned out. And I understand that, because it does, it happens to me too, has happened. It'll continue to happen in the future. But outside of those circumstances where you must do that, never send an invitation without providing an agenda. Not just because it's good practice and it's intentional and letting people know what they're in for. Drafting your agenda early in the process is like creating an outline for your facilitation plan. So you put the things in the agenda, you pull them from there, bring them over to your plan, and you're that much farther ahead. Okay, so now that we're prepared for this workshop, let's take a look at a few things to use at the beginning. So if you're new to facilitation, preparation may feel a little overwhelming. You may think that there are just too many things to try to get into your head. Fortunately, many people have been in the exact same spot as you are. And there are many tools and references available. One that can be useful, that I found to be useful anyway, is this facilitation canvas that you're looking at right now. It's from an organization called Nomad 8. They've got a lot of free material online. You can see their link there, nomad8.com. /free-stuff. You go there, there's, I don't know, there's probably a dozen or more things on there, including this facilitation canvas, where you can see many of the things that we've just talked about in the preparation are here, including the purpose, the people, and the agenda. You can start mapping all of this stuff out to help you move forward. So the first thing we're going to talk about here are check-ins. Check-ins are a great way to ease into a workshop. They are a context-setting tool which helps participants break from the context of where they were to be in the space of your workshop. Because even the most committed attendees and participants of your workshops will need a little bit of time to get their heads straight, especially in organizations that like to stack those meetings up on the hour, every hour throughout the day. When you're in those circumstances, you really want to give people time to take a breath. And they may have been in another meeting or at lunch or just had an argument with a partner, who knows? Wherever they may have been, they need a minute to catch their breath before jumping into the new context required for your workshop. I don't know if you noticed, but I did 2 check-ins at the beginning of this workshop. Actually, a check-in and an icebreaker. But I still did 2 activities. The renaming and what have you learned questions are both activities that I stuck at the beginning of this workshop, just to try to get everybody in the same space to learn a little bit more about each other. They're really great tools for that. So when it comes to check-ins, there is really only one rule, and that is never begin a workshop without one, ever. And yes, I am as serious as those capital letters suggest. But why? It's the context that we talked about earlier. When participants enter your workshop, their heads will not be in the right space to be productive contributors and collaborators that you need them to be. A check-in will help them, take off, shed that wet rain jacket, if you will, from where they were to being where they need to be. You definitely need to add these to your toolbox. They are extremely beneficial. So since I'm putting so much importance on check-ins, obviously there's only one tried and true way to do them, right? Wrong, there isn't. A check-in can be anything at all that gets your participants to focus on the here and now. They can be as simple as a weather report, where you ask them to put a sticky or other marker on the icon that fits best. You can see you've got 3 different types of weather to choose from there. Similarly, you can do things with emojis, very same thing, just a different modality. One of my personal favorites is a mindful moment or minute. This I've found that is a very good centering exercise, particularly for people that are jumping from context to context. And they can be as simple as asking your participants to silently focus on their breathing, to focus on the way that they're feeling, focus on themselves, and just to look inward and try to calm down a little bit. Or they could be as complicated as a guided meditation. Only your comfort in presenting this type of an activity and the participants' ability to receive this activity should be a limiter. Another good thing are jokes, especially knock-knock jokes. No, I'm serious. So people love to laugh together. They absolutely love it. And I encourage you to give your participants some joy and unleash your inner dad jokes. And if inner dad jokes don't give you joy, then please feel free to find better jokes out there and use them in your facilitations. So, and finally, we can't forget about very simple questions like, how are you? Or how are you feeling? They can work very well as well. Just simple things to get people to pay attention to you, to pay attention to the other attendees in the room or in the Zoom space, whichever it is. Anything can be helpful there. So what you do with your check-ins is completely up to you. Just be sure to make sure that they're simple and short. You don't want them to take up too much time because you will not create the energy as early as you need to move your facilitation forward. And depending on what you do, you compare a check-in with our next topic, which are icebreakers. So just like check-ins, icebreakers can be any activity that gets people used to participating, getting to know each other and creating things together, because that is the purpose of these facilitated conversations. It's co-creation. And I distinguish between ice checkers, ice breakers, and check-ins because icebreakers can and should be a little bit more involved, require a little bit more of your participants. They can also be more work-related than check-ins. But don't forget the fun. Just because we're getting to know each other doesn't mean we can't have some fun and create some relationship too, even in a business setting. So let's take a look at some examples of icebreakers that I've queued up here. The first is discussion questions. And discussion questions are a very simple way to break the ice without too much upfront planning or preparation. So, you know, if this is more of a last minute thing where things aren't, you know, you don't have as much time between the invitation and the workshop as you'd like, discussion questions are a great thing to fall back on. So with them, you ask single questions, and each participant takes a turn answering and providing some sort of context to their answer. It's this personal context that enables the participants to learn more about each other and hopefully let some of their guard down so that conversations can flow more easily. Letting the guard down is very important. You all, I'm sure, know about the concepts of psychological safety. When people feel that, they will talk more, they will contribute more, and you'll have stronger and better facilitated conversations. So the questions can be fun or work related. It depends on your audience, but it's a good habit to have one of each in your pocket. And here are some example questions that you can read here. You can and should ask anything that will help establish relationship between the participants or to get them a little closer to the work you'll be doing with them. That's completely up to you. You can see in the examples we've got simple, you know, more fun things like where's the most beautiful place you visited, to more work-related things like what one thing do you hope to get out of today's workshop? However you approach this, whichever you use, it's completely up to your discretion based on your knowledge of the client and of the audience in the workshop. Next, some of you may have heard about the airplane game. Some of you actually may have played it. And the airplane game is a famous Agile game that can be used to introduce critical Agile topics and principles. It gets your participants used to thinking, talking, and acting together. And it's best used when you have more time. Depending on which version you use, most games will last at least 20 minutes or more. So that requires one caution from me, and that is don't use this one for a 1-hour session. You won't have time to complete the work. You'll have a great time doing this game, but you won't be able to get to, you know, forwarding any actions as a result of your conversations. There are a lot of versions of the airplane game out there on the interwebs, so I'm not going to give you all of the setup and the rules. The shortest version is that the airplane game is a team-based game that can teach Agile concepts like one-piece flow, limiting work in progress, and definition of done, things like that. And when you're done, there's the added bonus of having all of these airplanes, paper airplanes that you've created and testing them out and see if they actually fly. Another thing that some of you may have heard of is Constellations. Constellations is excellent for quickly and clearly showing where your participants are in relation to the topic that you choose. It's great for online workshops because it can easily be done in collaborative apps like Miro, or Jamboard. In this case, also Google Slides works as well, because that's what this is. So the rules are pretty simple. Participants put their names on a sticky or some other type of marker, and you make a statement and ask participants to move farther away from or closer to the center of the circle, depending on their level of agreement with the statement that you make. The statement can be fun, like the one in the bottom left. I'm a dog person. Have people move in and out depending on where they're at, or they can be more business oriented. We have the right amount of collaboration. The closer to the center, the more they agree. The farther away, the more they disagree. And when you're finished making the statement and everybody moves their stickies, it'll look a little something like this. There'll be some people that are close to the center, some people who are going to be outliers on the edges. And if you've got time, it's an excellent idea to have a little debrief where you can try questions like, what's it like to be standing where you're standing? Particularly you look at the question in the upper right, or the statement in the upper right. I understand our product vision. It might be really nice to ask somebody why they're standing out on the edge, which means that they don't necessarily agree with that statement. It's a great, fun, and easy exercise. It's also great for in-person workshop, which is the first place that I ever did one of these constellations way back in the day when everything was in black and white. Instead of moving stickies, the people actually move themselves closer to the center of the circle, farther away. So as we move away from our icebreakers, there are literally thousands or more ways to approach your icebreakers. Again, going back to Google, I did a search for meeting icebreakers last week, and it brought back over 20 million results. This week, who knows, it could be much higher. So make sure you use your creativity and craft an icebreaker that is perfect for you and the workshop and its participants. Now, finally, our last topic in this discussion today is the design team alliance. You may be familiar with things like team agreements if you're used to working in that fashion. DTAs are similar, but they're on a much smaller scale. DTAs are specific to workshops or other sessions like team coaching or things like that, where the DTA focuses on just the time the participants will spend together in the workshop. So not if they've got other formal team agreements outside of the workshop, they may want to use some of that and bring it in here. But your DTA that you're creating is very specific to the space that you're working in, and should just be about the time the group will be spending together for this workshop, whether it's an hour, half a day, 2 days, whatever. The DTA is specific to that time frame. The goal of a DTA is to design and co-create the space participants will be sharing. And they try to answer basic questions like, how do we want to be together in this workshop? How do we want to handle disagreement? And what can your fellow participants count on you for, or anything else that will help set the space, norms, and expectations for the participants? Again, like our previous topics, there aren't one way of doing things, but you certainly want to try to discover how they want to show up for each other and what they'll do when things get difficult. Those are two of the most basic things that you can do with a designed team alliance. Now, Here's a pro tip for your DTAs, and that's making sure that you capture them somewhere and make that easily findable and visible, whether it's on a wall in a conference room if you're in person, or part of a Miro board or another presentation where you can put this information. They might find it useful to look at it again later, especially if the workshop is long or the participants start steering towards some difficulty. A quick detour back to their DTA should be enough to reset and reframe them. When going back to the DTA, you might also ask questions like, what's here that can help us with our situation, or what would you like to bring back to our session to help us move forward? You may even want to check in on the DTA after a break, whether that's just a bio break or lunch or a day break from one day to another. For this, you might want to try questions like, has anything happened that might need to be captured here? Or is what we've captured earlier still good enough for us to continue? These are, it's great to have this available and at hand in case you need it. And there's another part of the DTA, which is the Facilitators Alliance. And this points the camera at you as a facilitator. You ask the participants questions like, what do you need from me? How would you like me to show up in this space? What can I do to help us all be successful? And what this will do is enable you to be more responsive to your participants and show them that these alliances, these design team alliances, are for everyone participating, not just them. It will also enable you to craft your plan to your participants' needs and give them input into the process. Co-creation and collaboration are for everyone. So, and I mentioned the plan. Obviously, you want to have a plan coming in, but your plan is going to change, right? Your plans always change the moment that people walk into the room. They may change a little bit, they may change completely, but having these types of agreements in hand will help you deal with that change much easier and much more quickly. So in summary for this presentation, what I've tried to do here today is to get you to avoid the trap of getting to work, right? We know that our time is always limited, and all of our participants took time out of their busy schedules to be with you in your workshop. That should definitely be respected. So don't waste their time, but also don't jump in to the work too quickly. You may lose a little time by using check-ins and icebreakers and DTAs, but the value that you're creating from them far outweighs the time that is lost. So as it says here, don't be in too much of a hurry to get to work. When the relationships are better, the work is easier. And these types of activities will facilitate the relationships in the room, which will facilitate the conversations that you're looking for, which will then, in the end, make things better and easier, since that's the job that we have as facilitators. And with that, I want to thank you. And I also want to open up for questions. If there's, what else would you like to know today before we move on out of here and go to the rest of our busy days? You can either jump in on audio, or you can drop it in chat. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Belinda. And I'm going to assume, Jeff, that when you say I needed to hear that, that you're talking about what I finished up with, of not being in a hurry to jump in. I know sometimes we feel a very, very strong pressure to do that, particularly if we're in a room full of managers and executives or any other upper echelon people in the organization, there will be pressure on you to jump in and start working right away. I very much recommend, as a facilitator, you make it clear to both your sponsor and to the participants of the workshop that this is the work as well. It's not just doing that brainstorming and doing your diamond-shaped thinking. This is the work as well. Let's see. Hadil says, any tips for me as a facilitator for a workshop held for another main speaker, like planning meetings, for example? You will be, I don't necessarily understand the question. Can any tip? So you would be facilitating somebody else's meeting? Is that what that means? Yes. Okay. I don't think it changes. I mean, you might take a little bit more of a back seat if the person you're facilitating this meeting for is going to be a major participant, that is a contributing participant and not just a member of the group that's coming together to try to do the work. You may have to take more of a back seat in that scenario, but anything that you know about good facilitation is going to be relevant to that scenario also. You just may have to do less of it. That's the only thing that I can think of there. Anything else that anybody would like to know? Looks like we've got about 5 more minutes in this session. You're welcome, Hadil. Thank you for the question. I'm just looking, I'm looking away from the camera right now because I'm looking at all your boxes just to see. William, your response is hilarious, or your location, the Metroplex of Milliken, Colorado. I see Portland, Maine, Aberdeen, Scotland. These are things that I didn't see before. Phoenix, Arizona, Richmond, Virginia. So we have people from all over. Thank you, Shane. I appreciate your appreciation. And I suppose if there are no more curiosities, we can probably finish up for this session. Jeff is sharing some things that that he does to help build relationship. I think that's really great. And it's great to see some friends popping up in the chat. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you and you showing up to take in this session today. So thank you, everyone. If you want to, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. All you have to do is search for Teddy Carroll, and it'll be the one with the picture of my face. I think there's a little less beard hair in that picture, but it's still me. You'll note that it's me, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to do that. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for showing up and wish you a great day for the rest of your day.